waste into a resource and put it back into the material cycle or the value chain, so that basically there is no such thing as waste. Like how it happens in nature. um, if you throw like biodegradable stuff, it decomposes. Yeah, it regenerates, it becomes a part of the soil, it provides nutrition to maybe like a tree or a plant, which would grow, shed its fruit, it would fall to the ground. Like how this system is completely circular. There is no such thing as waste in nature.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Tiny Farm Friends podcast. If you refer to the graphs by Stephen et al., also known as the trajectory of Anthropocene, the Great Acceleration, you wouldn't miss seeing the exponential rise in the last 60, 70 years from 1950s to present day in construction, in building of large dams, in GDP, in water usage, in domesticating land, in carbon emission, in methane emission, and so on. One cannot just simply blame the population rise because one can clearly see the rise in per capita consumption and extraction of materials. As designers, architects, engineers, and responsible citizens, we play a pivotal role in this paradigm shift that is needed. Our guest today, Shamita, is one such architect. She is the flag bearer of this shift that is needed. Shamita is also the founder and CEO of the Malba Project. Through Malba Project, she strives to bring attention to the construction waste and enable transition to a circular construction industry in India. This conversation is for everyone who wants to become a more informed and a responsible citizen of this planet. I would like to know what you do when you're not trying to talk about waste or trying to save the world.
Yeah, I think talking about waste and environment and sustainability is a very it gives you a lot of energy. It gives me a lot of energy, but also drains me because it makes you feel like, oh, there's so many challenges. This is such a big
Yeah.
problem. So when I'm not doing this, I listen to a lot of like mindless like podcasts. I'm like super anything which is like comedy. I listen to that and I go for these long walks. Like I just came back from a 3 hour walk right before this podcast, so it was awesome. So I just put on my headphones and I go for these really long walks, and I try to be in and around nature as much as I can. So yeah.
So, how do you introduce yourself whenever you meet somebody, or how do you state your bio in say 3 lines?
Hi, I'm Shamita. I am an architect. I am extremely nerdy about the environment. I'm deeply passionate about it. And I express my emotions in sarcasm and bad humor. That's me in
I
a
see.
nutshell.
Interesting. So, can you tell
Yeah.
us more about yourself and your background story so far?
Um, I did architecture from, I mean, just talking about the relevant stuff. So I've grown up in Delhi, and I spent mostly my entire life in Delhi. And I went to the School of Planning and Architecture. I did my bachelor's in architecture over there. And I graduated. I worked for a couple of years in like a bunch of firms doing lots of different projects and just exploring and seeing what the architecture industry has to offer to like a young, bright-eyed graduate. And I think after spending 3 years in the profession, I just realized that I didn't like how the profession was being practiced, that it was extremely unsustainable. Um, there were a couple of things in like my final year of college which were nudging me towards sustainability. So it was a very slow transition with a lot of distractions on the way. Um, for example, if you remember, there were the Uttarakhand floods of 2013.
True.
And uh, so the glacier broke and there was a lot of damage, and there were these horrific sights of buildings just being washed away. And to be in college that time and looking at that, and to know that this was the natural disaster was bad in itself, but it was made worse by the poor architectural practices. Like those kind of realizations like really made you rethink your career choices and wonder that, hey, am I in the right profession? Is this what I should be doing? And then I think in 2018 I kind of realized that, okay, no, I need to do something else. So I used to go to the mountains a lot, and I found myself in Manali, Dharamshala, like a bunch of these super touristy places I used to go to a lot. But I remember in 2018 when I went back there, I was stuck in a 12-hour long traffic jam in the mountains. And when I finally reached Manali, I didn't recognize it. And I'd been there like 6 months ago. And there was so much construction that had happened in the past 6 months. I was just like, what is this place? I didn't recognize it. And there was a lot of debris everywhere. Malba jisko kehte hain.
Okay.
Everywhere you looked, there was just Malba construction. And I thought ki if there was another flood right now, there's no way that all of these people would survive. It was just a wake up call, and that's when I started looking up circular. I started looking up what to do with waste. I stumbled upon the phrase circular economy. It was very new. There wasn't much happening on it, and just kept researching, found a master's program, went for it, did my master's in circular economy, and now I've started something called Malba Project, and yeah, that's where I am now.
Awesome.
um, in
So
a nutshell.
in this whole story, I think the Manali trip, you could say, was the pivotal moment when you thought of starting something like Malba project, or was there some
Uh,
other turn in your like journey where you
mm,
decided, okay, now I have to come up with something like Malba project? And firstly, can you
so
also define little bit what is Malba for people who do not know that it is a Hindi word? Uh,
Okay, so for all the listeners right now who don't know what Malba is basically the Hindi word for construction and demolition waste. And yeah, I think all Hindi speakers are very familiar with this word. We see
mhm.
Malba very frequently just on roadsides and everything. And it mostly consists of, I would say, like concrete waste and broken bricks, and then you can find a little bit of mixed waste in it anyway, but a large part of it is concrete and bricks, yeah, which are unusable, they're waste. So yeah.
Got it. So, what was the
So
pivotal moment when you decided that you want to start something like the Malba project?
it kind of resulted out of my master thesis. I was researching a lot on how construction and demolition happens in India right now. What is the process? I was talking to a lot of people, and I was learning a lot of new things. And I just wanted to share what I was learning with everyone. So I wanted to put the knowledge out there and not make it so like scary and inaccessible. So I just started making a blog at first. So Malba
Mhm.
Project started with a blog, still exists. And then it went on to an Instagram page, which was, I think, a faster way of doing it, because every morning I would go for a morning walk and I would see some Malba. I would talk to some people. I would see some construction workers, demolition workers. I would have a conversation with them. And then I just started documenting like whatever I was finding. Uh,
Got it. So, apart from the building being unfit, what do you think are some
mm.
other reasons that people demolish buildings especially in India?
Um, Actually, the building being unfit is one of the best reasons to demolish a building. And I'm sure you, as an architect, would also agree that This is not always the case. You see really perfect buildings, 30-year-old buildings being demolished just like that. I think uh, concrete at least has a life of at least 60 years. Uh, it can easily stand for 60 years. And then you see all of these old buildings which have been standing for hundreds of years. So our modern buildings can have a much longer life, and they often get demolished because of changing family structures, our aspirations. We want to live in fancier, more modern homes, and this whole idea of what living well means, I think, is quite problematic, and it's changing. And it's a lot of it is, I mean, I don't want to fall into that cliche of like people who say, oh, looking westwards is bad, but we're looking westwards, and we don't know how to consolidate these new ideas with, like, we don't know how to manage the entire life cycle of a building. So yeah, and just the way our current construction practices are, I don't think they can accommodate for growth. They're very fixed. They're very rigid. So, for example, if you see someone with a small family, like say a husband, wife, maybe just living with their parents or something, it's a small family. But the moment they have a child, they need an extra bedroom. So one way would be like, okay, let's accommodate. We have some space in our house. How can we accommodate for this new member who's coming to our house? And instead of doing that, you say, okay, let's just demolish this building. While the baby is on the way, we'll rent a house somewhere else. We'll like a perfectly good structure which could have been maybe like just renovated, and yeah, is instead broken down. And I mean, yeah, there are multiple reasons, but I think population growth is a major reason for buildings being demolished very early. The need for, and our current construction practice is not being able to accommodate for this population growth. I think
True.
two things that I can think of: very rigid, very inflexible. Yeah.
One example that like I've seen in cities like especially Delhi, Gurgaon, Noida is this new trend where you have a perfectly fit house like you mentioned, and but there is this new model, right, when you give that house to a builder and he demolishes it, and then you
Mm.
make a, say it was earlier G+1, and then you demolish it and
Mm.
the builder makes it into G+3, and I think the owner keeps 2 floors and the builder sells 2 floors.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that is because we, as it is, are running out of space. There are not many new architectural projects happening in the city, but people are, just demolishing their houses which they built say 20, 30 years and
yeah,
trying to maybe convert them from G+1 to G+3 with a still parking or something like that.
yeah,
And
yeah.
maybe adding more luxury, if you could compare it on a macro trend, maybe it is becoming like say fast fashion also, but on a say 10-20 year timeline kind of thing.
Uh, Yeah, I think so. But well, the thing with this sort of housing is that it's working because that economic model works for people.
Yeah.
It's a viable business model, and people need that liquid cash, or like they don't want to be
Hmm.
stuck with this big asset, which is their house. Whereas if they could get some money out of it, if that whole construction could happen, and maybe they just have to give a few floors away to the builder, and they get a more modern, luxurious looking house with all the modern amenities, then yeah, like what's wrong with it? Like if you keep the environmental aspects aside, and all of that, like it works for people, which is why they're going for it. And maybe something that also needs to come into the market is different are different business models and like different ways of thinking. So this is one business model which is working. And actually, just going back to the reason why things get demolished, that you were saying, was that we have this very rigid idea of ownership, and
Mhm.
we have a very rigid notion of हमारे को एक मकान चाहिए जो हमारा हो and we are going to own it. But yeah, the thing is that laws change over time. Your ground coverage rules change, like
Exactly.
bylaws change over time. Your FAR changes over time, and then you want to make the most of it and you want to exploit that. But the materials and the construction techniques you're using to do that are not flexible enough to accommodate for these changing aspirations, changing laws, changing norms. It's a very like dynamic world that we live in, and construction is not very dynamic right now.
This reminds me of a concept that I think the Japanese already incorporated in some cities, or maybe showed some examples of it, which was called metamorphism. Like one example was
Mhm.
a Nagakin capsule hotel. Like you could always
Yeah,
add a
yeah.
room to it or something like that. But maybe that is too utopian to practice in a country like
I
India.
think it's not.
Not?
No, I think it's very doable. I think it's very possible. Actually, people do it. Have you seen when people build their houses on the top floor? They'll on top of the columns, they
They
leave
leave those
the steel bars
open-ended,
sticking up.
columns. Yeah.
Yeah, because they want to have that scope of building like vertically later if
Yeah, I mean, but
possible.
that has a limit, I would say. Like you could call that a model, like an incremental housing model, but
Yeah,
just to keep going, which like the Japanese envisioned. I mean, I personally, as it is, don't like to go like too up above the ground because you lose the connection with nature anyhow. But that's a different
yeah,
like whole topic we could have for
yeah,
the
yeah,
next
yeah.
podcast. So just
Yeah.
if you could give us a sneak peek on the demolition process, like how does it happen and what happens to the waste after the demolition happens right now in today's scenario.
So, okay, so firstly, the thing to know about demolition is that demolition is done by demolition contractors who
Mhm.
have a team of workers who are contracted separately, probably by the builder, by the architect, or whoever is handling your entire project. If there is a demolition and then a redevelopment to happen, then it's contracted to a separate team altogether. Then these demolition guys come, they take a look at your building, they'll see, okay, it's a 3-story building, it covers this much area, this is the kind of like doors and windows and cabinets, and they basically see what's in your house, what is salvageable, and they'll give you a quote. So you actually they buy the waste from you, so they will demolish the waste, they'll demolish the building, they'll take the waste, they'll dispose of the waste, and in exchange they will give you money. And this is like it's too good to be true, right? Like someone's
Yeah.
just dealing with your junk and just getting rid of it. What could possibly go wrong? What goes wrong here is the way they demolish it. Now, you can either demolish a building manually or mechanically, and mechanically is a faster process, but probably like requires more investment and stuff. So a lot of times they just hire labor. So this labor comes from all over the country. For example, I'll tell you, just give you the case of Delhi. So you will have labor coming from Kanpur, you will have labor coming from Bengal, and these guys will come for a duration of say 3 to 4 months while your demolition is going to last. And they start with just, I don't know if you wanted to get into the super technical
No,
side of
like
it,
let's get
but
into it,
they
like
start
because
taking out.
it's
Okay,
fascinating. Yeah.
they first like, so what they like, the official term for how demolition happens here is called partial deconstruction, which
Okay.
means that they actually take out doors and window frames and kitchen cabinets and anything and everything with economic value is taken out first, like loaded onto trucks, and second sent to like secondary markets where it is sold for a price. And then they sort of like, once the building is just a hollow shell, then they start breaking it. So they'll probably take out the internal partition walls. They'll take out wo chhajje todenge, the yeah.
Lintels, yeah.
Damn, I've forgotten like the word. Yeah, I've
Yeah.
forgotten the English word for it. Yeah, the
Yeah.
sun shading devices,
got
like
it,
they'll
yeah.
break those, and then they sort of demolish from top to bottom. So from what I remember was that wait, how does it happen? No, sorry. Sabse pehle on the ground floor, they break the roof slab. So they sort of create a hole, and then they start going floor by floor, and then they break things so that they sort of
Falls
fall
into the
inwards.
cavity, yeah, kind of
Exactly,
thing.
exactly. So they start demolishing the building first from like bottom to top, and then it goes from top to bottom. They break the once the roof slab is off, then they start taking away the structural beams, and so then they'll start from top to bottom. They'll break the top floor, then the floor below and below. And this is all done manually by these people using like hammers. You should see how they're doing it. They have jackhammers, and they're breaking concrete with it, and they've got manual hammers as well, and they're doing it by hand. So depending on how much work there is, your construction site can have demolition site can have anywhere between like 25 people working simultaneously to down to like 5 7 people towards the end of the demolition. They contract these transportation guys who once your building is broken down, then actually they separate the saria, which is the steel bars, which actually fetches the highest price from
That
the demolition.
happens on site, or do they do it at some segregation facility later on?
No, it happens on site.
I
This
see.
all happens on site. So if you've seen, they always put these blue GI
Yeah,
sheets.
corrugated sheets, just
Yeah,
at
yeah,
the
yeah. So they
construction
cover
site.
the construction site with that, and they demolish. They separate all of like the steel and everything, and then what's left behind, which is actually a huge chunk of the waste, is the concrete debris and the broken bricks. And this has pretty much like no economic value for them, which is why this is not managed very well. And Malba project started as a way to make sure that this waste is managed well, because uh, we think that the informal sector does a superb job of recycling and salvaging all the materials, but they only do it for the materials with economic value. So they leave out the things which don't have economic value, and those have high environmental impacts. They are bulky and they are non-biodegradable, and yeah.
So
So that's
apart
how a
from
demolition just happens.
concrete and brick, and you
Yeah.
said like the doors and windows go to the secondary markets, what are some other common types of construction waste that come out? And like out of all the waste, how much of it is like, do you think is recyclable or biodegradable?
So as of now, like leaving soil out, most of it is recyclable. We have, I think, 3 functional recycling plants in Delhi, maybe even 4 now. There was a fourth coming up. So these guys take your concrete waste and they process it, and they break it down into smaller pieces. Like they clean it, they wash it, they separate it, and they crush it. So the really fine particles become like manufactured sand. M sand is what they call it. And then the slightly larger become fine aggregate, and the slightly larger become coarse aggregate. And these things can actually go back into making concrete again. So
Interesting.
so they replace natural stone aggregate, and they replace sand, which is river sand, which is one of the most scarce resources in the world. India is so short of river sand right now that we are importing it from Malaysia. We are like ruining the river basins in Malaysia because the rate of construction in India is so high. So, yeah. But there are recycling facilities for concrete. And I think they say that manufactured sand is of such good quality that it can even replace the river sand, and on a 1:1 ratio.
So, how many people, or especially say architects and people who are involved in this building industry, like aware about these facilities, and are they common across
Yeah.
India, or there are only few such facilities in some major cities in India?
So as far as I know, I think architects are not aware about these recycling facilities at all. I for my master thesis, I conducted a survey with architects, and I asked them that, do you know about the recycling facilities in your city or around your city? And I also asked them, are you aware of the regulations of the laws regarding your demolition waste? And like majority of them, like 70% of them were not aware of this. That's like a huge number. Yeah.
So, you just mentioned laws. So,
Hmm.
can you help us understand whether there are some laws when it comes to, say, construction and demolition practices, or
Yeah.
say guidelines that the government has put in place?
Yeah. So in 2016, there were the construction and demolition waste management rules, which were notified. So these actually specify the roles of each and every stakeholder in the waste value chain, and like from the central government, what is the job of the central government, down to the urban local bodies, our MCD, our municipal corporation. Yeah. What is their job? What is the pollution board supposed to do? What is the waste generator supposed to do? What are your duties? And those got notified in 2016, and they said that from 1 year of these rules being notified, cities with a population of 1 million and above have to set up waste recycling or waste processing facilities. And cities which have a population of less than 1 million have 3 years to do this. Now, it's been 5 years now, and I think the uptake has only been by 13 cities or maybe 15 cities at max. Yeah, so the uptake is really low. Um, yeah, but these rules exist.
Got it. So just to maybe summarize that and maybe see like how it could work. Suppose if I am wanting to demolish my house today, so what are the
Mhm.
steps like as a citizen should I like take as an aware citizen to make sure that
Okay,
all the practices are being like taken care of?
so I think this is where it gets a little complicated. So the problem with the waste rules was that the C&D waste management rules was that they left out the small waste generator, which is the maybe a house that is getting demolished. So there is a clause in the waste management rules which says that only people who are generating more than 20 tons per day or 300 tons per month, these rules are applicable to those guys, which is
Okay.
why like so much of the private construction gets left out, and there is no information about how you guys should deal with it. But there's like one line which says what you should do, which is that go deposit your waste at the closest collection point or the collection center. So get a demolition done. You need some kind of a no objection certificate or some kind of like permission that this can be done. And I was talking to the like the chief engineer in one of the municipal corporations. And he was telling me that when you apply for these permits, they give you like a list of like do's and don'ts and how to manage this. Now, I don't know how true that is. I have not tried demolishing my own building. But this is what they said that they do for anyone who applies for a permit. There's also a waste management fee that you have to pay at the urban local body, whichever one is dealing with your demolition. And you have to pay them a fee because you are the polluter, technically. If you're demolishing your house, you are a polluter. And going by the polluter pays principle. If you pollute, then you pay. So you pay the municipality a fee to handle your waste, and they will do it for you. Yeah. And
Okay.
another thing to note is, sorry, just like one small
Yeah.
thing to note is that also if you are paying for your waste to get transported to this collection point, which is, made by the municipality for you, you can claim a refund for this from the municipality. According to the rules, you should be able to claim a refund for this.
Okay, got it. So, how are the practices in, say, Europe or US when it comes to dealing with C&D waste?
Mm, I think it happens very like quick. So in all of these countries, the bottom line is that your waste should not be going to a landfill. That is your worst case scenario. Um, and so all the strategies that they use is to divert the waste from the landfill. And the best case scenario in all of these countries is also recycling right now. Recycling is huge. It is, yeah, just because we build with concrete so much and there is no other way to deal with concrete. Currently, like recycling is the best thing you can do when you have concrete in such a large quantity that you can just process it, and they make like construction materials out of it. They make like bricks or pavers, and that's also happening in India. So, but it's probably like more scaled up, it's more systemized. And they're also starting to transition towards complete deconstruction. So you will have a lot of these companies which, just like in India, how it happens that they take out the doors and windows and all of that, they do that. They also like assess your building to see. So it's not just taking out the buildings, but they'll also see, oh, do you have any asbestos in your building? Like this is a hazardous material. Like, do you have any? Yeah, so it has to be dealt in a certain way. So those kind of things are there. It's more structured, I would say. Yeah.
Got it. So you just mentioned recycling, right? And your master's was also in circular economy. So can you maybe define circular economy in your own words, what circular economy is?
So if I was to explain it to you, circular economy is a way of designing waste out of your system. So everything becomes circular. If one process is generating waste, then how do we turn that waste into a resource and put it back into the material cycle or the value chain, so that basically there is no such thing as waste. Waste is
Got it.
food, like how it happens in nature. um, if you throw like biodegradable stuff, it decomposes. Yeah, it regenerates, it becomes a part of the soil, it provides nutrition to maybe like a tree or a plant, which would grow, shed its fruit, it would fall to the ground. Like how this system is completely circular, there is no such thing as waste in nature. So it's that,
Got it.
in a
So
very simple way.
what are some other circular economy businesses or practices that you might have come across in your, say, masters in Austria and like traveling around in Europe?
Like the way I described circular was very simplistic, just to give you an idea of how it happens. But circling materials back into the cycle can happen at different like life cycle stages. For example, let's think of the manufacturing of a t-shirt. So maybe like while you're stitching the t-shirt, or while you've got like a roll of fabric, and you're cutting out these like templates to stitch your t-shirt, and the leftover fabric is also waste, right? So maybe that can, if you shred that down, it can go back into making fabric. Then, for example, you've used that t-shirt, you've worn that t-shirt, but now you don't want to use it anymore, or you think it's out of fashion, it's out of style. So you can either donate it, you can give it to someone who might like your t-shirt. You can barter with them. You can, so basically this would be like reuse, that you give it to someone to reuse. Then there's also, so there are lots of like business models around it. Also, there are lots of people who are going to take your secondhand clothing. They might refurbish it, they might like jazz it up a little bit, add more value to it, and then sell it again in the market. Like, it's not lost its value, it's just lost its value to the individual. So you can keep it in the material loop. Eventually, when it's like completely tattered and worn down, the thing we do in like Indian houses so much that we turn into a rag. So it's like so many of our old socks which have just been turned into like cleaning cloths. So
Maybe we've
yeah,
been
so
practicing circular economy like since ages, and maybe it's just a
we
cool.
are, we are, we are just like a very sustainable society. I think we're transitioning towards being unsustainable, and that's where
Yeah,
it needs to stop. But traditionally, I think we've been doing a really good job of it.
got it. So,
Yeah.
what is your roadmap ahead with the Malba project now?
Mm. I mean, Malba project is still at a very nascent stage, so we still have to pick it off the ground. It started as a way to spread awareness about construction and demolition waste. But now we realize that we need to be more solution oriented, because just spreading awareness is not going to cut it, because people don't know what to do and how to deal with it. So we're trying to come up with solutions, and we're currently at like a pilot project stage where we're testing our ideas on like a small group of people and seeing where it goes. So there's a long road ahead. I'm not going to like give more details right now,
Got
but
it. What are some of the challenges that you could like foresee starting an initiative dealing with construction waste, or say what are the challenges in general also that business that is trying to say base it on circular economics faces in a country like India?
mm, I mean, the construction industry is very traditional, in a way. They're very set in their ways, and disrupting the construction industry is a very hard thing to do. And I'm sure we're going to face a lot of resistance for it, because just when people don't understand something, I think they tend to misunderstand it. So I do foresee challenges from contractors, from builders, who are going to feel like we're trying to take their business away. It's not true. We're just trying to make sure that it's just happening in a more environmental friendly way. But I do see that as a challenge. Yeah. I also see it as a challenge to like just being like a woman in the industry, in a very male dominated industry, especially with waste. I feel like I've not seen too many women in the waste sector in India either. So I do see that being a bit of a challenge as well. That why should we listen to you? Like, who are you? Who are you to tell us that this is not the right way to do it?
I mean, I
Yeah.
would agree to that point, like when it comes to building construction and the whole industry. But I would say that I think women are leading the circular economic front, and like maybe they're designing with
That's it.
biomaterials, or say when it comes to some circular fashion, or again, like a lot of stuff that like really cool women are doing in India, and hopefully like we'll be interviewing them in the podcasts as well. So
Yeah.
now when you think of say going about it, so what are your thoughts on a top down approach versus a bottom up approach, like building up a
Mm.
community and like working with them, or versus say uh, when it comes to
Mm.
say getting funding for the whole project?
Yeah. So how we're operating is that we're definitely a bottom-up approach. We are working with worker like demolition workers. We're working with contractors, and we're trying to we're trying to keep the government out of it for now, just because we feel that the government is too burdened with the amount of work and the amount of like things that they have to do. And this was also like one of the findings of my master thesis, that top-down approaches are 100% the most important thing in an emerging economy context, like especially like ours. Things don't get moving till you have some policy, some incentive to do something. People will not change their behavior till they have to change their behavior, and they are given a reason. So like a little push, like it could be a push from a regulation. Okay, we have banned mining, so you can't do it anymore. It's a push in a certain direction.
Mm-hmm.
And certain like if you give tax rebates or something, and then you have these financial pulls, as I like to call them. So the good thing about top down is that they have the ability to provide the push and the pull to move people in a certain direction. But the thing is that they're just really overburdened, and they're not able, they're understaffed, they're under capacity, they're underfunded. And especially in the waste sector, they don't have the ability to do it. So that's why bottom up approaches are really important. Startups, the startup culture, the entrepreneurial culture is super important, because we don't wait for the long bureaucratic process to happen. We show that it is possible. We prototype solutions. We show them, okay, here's a solution, it works. And then it's like easy for like the government or like any large institutional bodies to say, oh, okay, this works, we should fund this. And I think
Got
it's,
it.
you need a little bit of both uh, to make a change.
Got it. So we've been talking about what happens, say, during the demolition process, and about the waste that is created after demolition. But do you think there is a lot of waste being generated during the construction process itself, like with the designers trying, say, fancy things with which requires a fancy shuttering and like all
Mm-hmm.
those kind of fancy design that we try and do from Pinterest mostly, but like they also end up create waste.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
So construction definitely generates quite a bit of waste. It's definitely lesser in magnitude as compared to demolition. Because imagine like a whole building
Yeah.
versus the little bit of wastage that was happening in making that building. So it's definitely smaller in quantity, but it is quite significant. And I think the architect and the designer has a huge part to play in it, even architecture students for that matter, because for example, when you make something super custom design, but you're using like standard industrial materials to make it. So if you want to make like a really like fancy custom cabinet, and then you're using your regular 4x8 plywood, and then you have to cut it up and there's a lot of wastage. It can be avoided if you just made something using the entire material, or thought
Hmm.
of that material and its size and the way it's industrially produced. Like know your material and design with that material and plan for that material. So keep the, if they're designers and architects, at an early stage, at the design stage itself, think about these things. How is my building going to be taken apart at the end of its life? What kind of flooring am I planning? Am I using like a terrazzo flooring? Am I using stone flooring? Like what kind of sizes do I need? Or if I'm using tiles or something, then yeah, like how do I plan um, the most optimal use of materials? They can save so much materials. And I mean, if you think about, oh, we have to do this in AutoCAD, it's going to be so hard. Well, then you're
Yeah.
using the wrong software. There are so many of these BIM. There's so many softwares out there which use BIM. it's time to also like upgrade our skills and use the latest software out there, because it's really going to help you transition to I don't know, like a futuristic practice, which is environmental friendly. Also, like there's a lot of research happening on BIM and how to, and I think it's just like a base skill set that you need. So please don't be happy with just AutoCAD and SketchUp and think that that's it. You need to upgrade your skill set as designers and architects to keep with the times. I had through my thesis, I found that architects, if they plan for waste at an early stage, they can reduce the demolition waste by about 53%. And they can reduce
Fascinating.
construction waste by 30%. Like these are huge numbers.
That's huge.
If we are if we are generating about 500 million tons of waste every year, imagine if we can make that 250 million tons. That is a huge difference. This is like the second largest waste, like amount of CND waste being produced in the world after China. Like imagine if we can cut it by half. That's a significant saving.
Thank you, Shamita. It has been absolutely enlightening, and I
Thank you so
got to
much for
know a
having me.
lot about the whole process, and there's so much to learn when it comes to construction waste, and there's so much to do, like in India especially.